So recap the intercooler stuff. Right. So coming into episode 6, we're going to be making some more power. So we're completely out of injector, if you guys have been paying attention. We're going to install our injector that's used in the 180 kits all the way up to our prototype 240, 250 kit. So it's a 1200cc injector that's supplied from Fuel Injector Clinic. I've been using FIC since forever. Definitely like 2010, 2011. It was really before we even had like the nice Bosch small body injectors. FIC, they do some pretty cool like data match technology. Instead of just grabbing injectors out of a pile, they actually flow test each injector and they'll match a pair, or I guess a set of injectors for you in every box. And they do supply the injector voltage offset. It's also considered like latency or dead time. So that's the amount of time it takes for us to send the signal to the injector and the injector to open up and actually start spraying fuel. This injector data is important for us as a tuner to make sure that your car probably has the most weight on startup, but it also is really critical at like low speed, low fuel demand. We've gotten these injectors to start and run well on gas or E85 pretty well. I mean, we get messages from people saying that our tunes on the big injectors are the best they've ever had in startup and drivability. We're gonna push this even harder in this episode. We're gonna be offering a WS200. So our WS200 before was E85, and we find a need for offering a race gas tune, you know, with the boost in the 20 PSI range. So we're gonna be doing that today. We're gonna install the injectors, which really this kit only requires an injector upgrade. So this is a factory injector. These things, I mean, just to put it in perspective, they're almost identical looking. But a factory injector flows, I think I tested it, depends on base pressure obviously, but in like the 50, 55 base pressure range, I believe it flowed 550 cc. And this injector at that same pressure is gonna flow about 1200 cc. So the big problem with an injector that is double the size is getting them to start and idle really well. And that's very important for the experience with these tunes when you start making a lot of power, is you want them to not only perform well at wide open throttle, but you want them to perform well at startup, no matter what temperature it is, and idle. And a lot of the low RPM, like low fuel demand stuff. So we take a lot of pride in making sure that these things start in any weather perfectly, or as great as we could possibly make it, and drive really well. We're gonna be installing these quick, and we're also gonna be installing the intercooler. This is a prototype that we worked with Ian on. It's a Garrett 4.5 inch core. The core dimension is actually taller than the factory core. So the intercooler has to be installed on a slight angle, which kind of gets it more into the path of airflow, but you do have to remove your factory intercooler shroud. But this had amazing results in testing when we were testing it last year. The factory intercooler in the 20-21 PSI range would gain anywhere between 40 and 50 degrees in the 300-foot pole. And this intercooler would only gain about 10 degrees, 10, 15 degrees in that same amount of time. And we are installing our WSRD SPAL fan upgrade. Essentially the same thing as an 18 fan. So you can see this, the fan shroud is set up to accept the fan. It's a pretty nice design. We know that this thing's gonna perform well, and we're gonna really put it through its paces and get some real data to back up between the two. This is really important for pump gas, especially if you wanna continue to make power throughout like a long pull. So, you know, as temperature goes way up, we have to pull essentially timing and power back to keep it from knocking. So The whole point of a bigger intercooler is to keep the air charge cold as possible, and just having colder air in general will make more power, and then having colder air throughout a pass will make sure that we can keep all the power in the tune in it. Yeah, we're gonna get to installing this, and we're actually gonna go out. The weather's really nice today in Michigan. We're gonna go out to the farm and play around a little bit. Got the intercooler off. It's probably good practice to block off the intercooler piping and blow out the intake manifold of all the like sand and dirt and everything like that, because you're going to be popping these injectors out. It's possible that some dirt can fall in there, so we just did that real quick, and we're going to do it through the intercooler hole, changing out these injectors. You can do it, especially if you have like an aftermarket exhaust. It's really easy just to go in through the back and remove the injectors. But what I normally do is I'll disconnect the fuel line to the rail, pull the fuel rail off with the injectors, disconnect each one, and then put the new injectors in it with the lock that holds the injector to the rail, put the whole rail on it. So that's what we're gonna do real quick. It's 2 bolts.
It smells crazy, that fuel additive.
It does smell a little different, doesn't it?
Yeah, 2 bolts using what, a
T30.
T30.
You just push this little clip.
It's hard to see.
Yeah. This little clip, you can see there's lockers on each side. When you push the clip, it moves out of the way. And you see Can-Am was kind enough to put a little bit of dielectric grease on there. So, pull these bad boys out. Stock, those are stock 17 Turbo R. And $3.99. Yeah, same part number, identical. 17 Turbo R and this 19 120 has same part number on the injectors, just in case anybody was wondering.
So safety clip for the injector.
Yep. Prevents the fuel pressure from pushing the injector. Normally, like, it depends, it has a lot to do with the style of sealing. Some injectors, this black piece would be missing. There'd be more of like a cushion style injector, and the pressure of the rail and fuel pushing into the cylinder head would actually seal it. But these 14 millimeter uppers and lowers, they just seal solely on pushing out into the hole that they're made for. Supporting the injector into the rail is important with these little clips on these style injectors. You can see there's sand. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just inevitable that you're gonna get sand in there.
Yeah, there you go.
But
oh yeah.
Making sure that the engine ingests the least amount of sand possible is pretty important. I'd say pulling the injector out, would take most of it with it, but.
And ours is just hasn't even seen dirt yet.
Well, yeah, this thing was taken to the dunes when it was in demo, so. Yeah, so you can see the fuel rail is non-return. So we only push fuel in to one side. So normally, like, especially in the turbocharged world, forced induction, they'll have a rising rate fuel pressure regulator, so fuel will flow through this. There'll be a line with a regulator somewhere else remote mounted. We thought it was really important to upgrade the fuel pump on our E85 kits is because of this design. So if you are running out of fuel and pressure is dropping in the line, that means that these injectors are essentially supplying more fuel to the engine than the pump can put into this rail. So you can get a lot of uneven amount of fuel in the rail to supply the engine. It's less, I'd say maybe less detrimental on a return style system. In forced induction, if you have fuel pressure not falling off, it's never good. We just take it very seriously to make sure that these machines will continue to perform and not have any problems. And honestly, as far as I know, we've never had any engine problems with these. Never blown head gaskets. We don't have problems with ignition breakup. There's a lot of things that we take to the nth degree to make sure that there's no problems. So, and you know, paying attention and making sure that people are, you know, making the right moves is one of them. So, show you a little secret. The O-ring seal into the cylinder head with these brown rings isn't as amazing as using the blue ring. They're both a 14mm ring, but I like using the blue one. And you can see.
Yeah, a little more.
And the oil that's, I mean, you could see it too, like there's inevitably a very tiny boost leak whenever you get all that oil build up around the injector. So when you install them, you could steal the lower injector off the upper part, the upper seal off the stock injectors.
Stock FIC's brown, then we use the factory.
Honestly, even like the factory injectors, they're a brown lower. Everyone uses a brown lower. Yeah, this goes to show that brown O-ring, how easy it is in there.
Yeah, sorry for the goofy angle.
It's not OEM. Oh no. As you can see, the thing's freaking huge compared to stock. And that's how it sits.
Pretty big. Pretty big. Tight, tight.
That's good. Yep.
Good?
Yep.
After some time, it's all trimmed. It took a while.
The tune flashed, tires on for going to play, and we're essentially going to swap the clutch kit over to the X190 kit from KWI. Chris is what got this kit working really nice. We just installed it in a car with the 180 and 200 kit. Swap this over, load up on the trailer, and go have some fun, eh?
Yeah. Excited.
Hopefully it doesn't get too muddy. But we're gonna, you know, try to give you the whole experience, startups and cruising and power. The last thing we do have to do is we have to crank this wastegate in more. I think we're at like 7 crack pressure now. And we're gonna set it up for the WS200 crack pressure, which is about 3 threads left. About 10 PSI or so, 9-10. So get this done, weights in, wastegate adjusted, and let's go do some stuff. Maybe 65?
Cold start, you said?
Yeah, it's cold.
Beans. Can we get up there? Oh. Good? It's higher. Woo! That's slow. That is slow. That's how we do it though. like, damn, that's a lot.
So we're gonna go into detail about the FPX3 Green, the bolt-on turbocharger for the Can-Am. So the factory Can-Am X3 compressor wheel is a 35 millimeter inducer and a 46 millimeter exducer. The FP wheel, we're using a 40 millimeter inducer and a 55 millimeter exducer. Staying within the stock frame, that's a pretty large compressor wheel upgrade. This turbo, you know, would be making 200, and we've already made over 240 horsepower with it, 243. Turned up all the way, I'd expect we could be making 300 crank horsepower with it. There's the cool feature is everything bolts right on. It's machined for the factory coolant hoses to bolt directly on. The factory drain line bolts on. We actually include a really high quality oil drain gasket, and it's also comes with an adapter to use the factory oil feed fitting. We will be including new crush washers for the feed line, but that's machined to go directly into to use the factory fitting. Currently, we installed one on our machine on pump gas 93. We're making a little over 200 horsepower at like 22 pounds of boost. So race gas and E85's next. Another thing to note is the factory wastegate does bolt on, obviously, just like normal. This is a prototype gate that we're using right now that's modified to fit on this. If you are receiving one of our prototypes, this wastegate spring is much greater than the factory one, so it's important to make sure that there's only a little bit of preload on this gate. Your crack pressure should be around 9 psi, and that'll allow us to run a lot more boost. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty badass that it bolts right on. Huge compressor wheel. I mean, the compressor wheel, we were barely seeing any intake air temp rise on the dyno, and I mean, we're way under what this thing can make. So when we get this thing turned up, it'll be a good time. Big turbo's on, and we're testing it on 91 and 93 octane. So we're running out on the stock wastegate. So we modified a Borg-Warner EFR wastegate, and spent some time tuning the I guess the closed loop boost control to allow this thing to operate like a factory wastegate should. So putting a different wastegate on, you should not do without proper tuning, especially one that's like this. So this one, when you put pressure to it, it starts to crack just on a bench at 8 psi, where the stock one starts to crack at 3 psi. And I found that there are two different wastegates OEM. The 120 has a different part number than the Turbo R's. The 120 is a 2 psi or 2 psi crack, and then the Turbo R is a 3 psi crack pressure. So this one's an 8 psi crack pressure, and then I added a little bit of preload, so the crack pressure that starts to move this specific gate is about 10 psi or something like that. And just to put it into perspective, you know, your crack pressure varies how much boost you can run based on like the main spring in the gate. So the factory gate at 11 psi crack pressure was 90%, pretty much all the way the most boost we could possibly run on that wastegate to make 20 pounds of boost. And then this gate is like 53%. So just a warning, don't just go slap a gate on stock tune because it will not work right. So it's on pump gas timing, a safe AFR, and I was able to make over 200, but making the tune safe and, you know, at 21.5 pounds, we still have about a pound of boost over our target, so that the ECU can actually compensate for that change and and be able to make it essentially achieve target boost. So if I turn the boost up anymore, we get too close to the limit and it has the potential to run past it and lean out. We're gonna leave it here, made 198, 196 on the last 2 pulls I just did on pump gas. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna do an E85 tune for it, but I really think that the E80, this setup here is best for pump gas because you're not gonna really wanna run over 21 pounds safely. I may mess with it in the future, but I just think that this is a safe, almost 200 horsepower, just under it on pump gas. This is still stock intake, this is still stock exhaust. This is a mostly stock machine. We have an Empire pipe, the turbo, a wastegate, injectors, and then the 2018 stock fuel pump. Do some 3-bar map sensor work, get that all dialed in, and then we're gonna turn the boost up, and that's gonna be in the next episode. So we're gonna kind of roll into that with, I think this is episode 6.
We had 5.
Yeah, this is
the long
6.
one. This is 6.
I mean, it's impressive power. Honestly, it made 209 was the most, but boost was over what is readable from the factory map sensor, and it leaned out a little bit. We were making 202, 204 at like 22 pounds, but it makes some boost oscillation because the ECU can't see over about 22.5. Stay tuned for the E85 stuff. I'd really like to get into the 240 horsepower range on stock intake, stock exhaust on E85. Clutching is starting to, this is the X190 kit. It's stupid close on the dyno. It's 8,081, so it may need a little bit more weight, but I'm pretty happy with tuning the car on the dyno with the clutching that's in it without making a ton of changes. And when you're making huge power increases, it's smart to get the RPM back in check, but considering we're just over about 200-300 RPM, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll test it on the street, but it should be close considering this clutching was a little low on the 180 kit with Dylan in the car. So we had almost 550 pounds of passenger. It was like 7,700. And then with the added power, so we're making, yeah, so the 180 kit, we've dynoed a couple of them. They make between 180 and 185 at about 19 pounds of boost, 19.5 pounds of boost. So the bigger turbo at 21 is making the 198. And the cool thing about this turbo is, you know, generally, unless you're making like a humongous exhaust change, like a turbine wheel change, you're not gonna see like huge increases at the same pound, you know, same boost pressure. The compressor's working way less, so it doesn't build any heat during a pull. We put the stock intercooler back in it just to test it. And with the fan on, it'll maybe gain 2 degrees in a 4-second rip. So the air is much colder than the stock turbo, stock compressor, but this compressor wheel is quite a bit bigger, so it makes sense. And then the setup will allow us to run way more boost pressure. So we'll get it turned up on the 3 bars to, you know, 27, 28 pounds of boost and see what happens.
Cool.
Cool.